Welcome back, Zoe.
We're back.
Back to the States, back to the show,
Back to the States, back to the show.
back to the microcast.
On a scale of 1 to extremely, how jet lagged are you right now?
Today is a good day.
You slept until 6?
Yes, instead of 4:45, which has been my wake-up call for the last
On
3
Saturday,
days.
you and I were both up at like 4:30 in the morning cleaning the house.
I'll tell you what, when you're in recovery mode and you wake up early and you drink 2 espressos, you get a lot of spring cleaning done.
Get a lot of spring. I cleaned out our fueling cabinet where I keep all of our gels and flasks. So that was exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
It looks good in there.
It looks great. Now I can actually find my gels rather than like doing what I usually do, which is like 8 minutes before my long run starts, being like, oh my God, I only have like expired spring energy from 4 years ago.
Something I tell athletes in kind of their peak training for a big race, I'm like, don't do any household chores now. Do them after.
Oh my God.
Do them after your race.
Okay. I'm going to someday write a paper about this. The 3 leading causes of derailed training and injury that aren't just like normal overtraining. Taking the family to Disney World. People get fucked up walking all over Disney World.
Gardening?
It's true. I was going to say gardening and moving brush.
Brush.
People moving brush around, doing yard work specifically. That's number 2. That's right after Disney World with the kids. Number 3 is dancing at weddings. Those are the 3 leading causes of athlete injury that aren't running.
I'm hoping that all of our grass dies eventually in our backyard so I don't have to spend a single another minute mowing.
You spend almost 4 whole minutes out of the summer doing yard work.
I do the bare minimum. That's how tired I am.
Minimum effective dose yard work.
So, okay, we just got back from this race a couple days ago now.
The race is the Chianti Castles Ultra Trail Mont Blanc Chianti Castles 123K. Right?
Yes, but it wasn't in Mont Blanc.
But it's like owned by UTMB.
Yes,
UTMB Chianti Castles UTCC 123K.
What a mouthful.
It's a lot, dude.
My God, the SEO on that.
Not going to be good.
Can't be good.
Can't be good. Just alphabet soup.
Well, I'm excited to chat a little bit about the race, our takeaways, some of the things we learned that are applicable for athletes who have big races coming up, A races.
Or small races.
Yeah, big and small. I mean, big doesn't mean length, but how much it matters to you.
Right.
Races that matter to you. That's what this call is about.
Yes. It's not about the length of your race. It's how much it means to you.
But let's warm up with some hot or nots because there's some weird shit out there that I need to chime in on this.
So when we say Chianti, we mean the Chianti Hills. And by that, we mean Tuscany. And by that, I mean Italy. And by that, I mean Europe.
Excellent. Set the stage.
Just to situate us, that is the context we are in. I think that's important because, running, we'll talk about this later. International races are a fun and exciting way to experience one very specific aspect of another culture.
Well, let's just start off with that. Racing internationally, hot or not?
I'm going to say hot. I've now done, 3? Like 6? No, I've done 2 times at UTMB. I've done MCC.
Okay.
Twice.
Okay.
Argentina, Mexico, Italy.
5. That's a lot of international racing.
Yeah.
You're a true expert.
And I have enjoyed the experience of I've enjoyed all of those trips, and to varying degrees, I've enjoyed the actual race as a part of that trip. And it's trending upwards.
Okay, for you, international racing.
Hot.
Hot.
I like it.
Hot.
To me, I love traveling, and I also love training, and sometimes something I struggle with is I'll just get like I'll be like so into the training and doing work. It's hard for me to like think about a way of like detaching from those things and like living life and going and experiencing the world, which is something I genuinely love to do. So being able to do it through running feels like kind of the best of both worlds for me.
Yeah, I hear that. I feel that. I think for me, running is it's almost like a passport.
Yes.
And you take your passport and you go to different interesting places that you haven't been before. I mean, you've spent a lot of time in Italy. You live there. I've been there, but through skiing, in my previous career. And I always wanted to run there, but I've never really been in Chianti. So I think it's like, okay, this is a great opportunity to use that vehicle for self-expression and take it over to a new place, a new culture, and experience something different. That's why I like it. I mean, this stuff isn't cheap. We're not sponsored athletes. No one pays our way to go out here. Like we spend our discretionary income, our adult money, our 40-year-old adult money
to do our hobby, which is jogging.
Yeah, to go jog for 13 hours around what are quote unquote, for our YouTube people, I'm using air quotes here, the hills of Chianti. And I like that. And we've done that in Europe, and I think it's in Mexico, Argentina. And for me, the race is great, but it's about kind of the stuff that you get to do beforehand and after. And I think we've learned a lot over the years to really carve out that time after the race to actually go and experience the area we're in. And like, we did a great job of that, as banged up as we were.
Yes, dude, we were for days, could barely. So my parents are like almost 70, and we're trying to like go sightseeing around the Chianti area, and like they were just routinely dropping us on walks.
They were so patient.
Yeah.
We could not get up and down the stairs.
Nope.
I couldn't get into the car.
Infirm.
It was tough. But I like that comes with the territory. It comes with doing a 75-mile race. But I really like that we got to like experience the culture. We went out of our way to make sure we went to places that like weren't as touristy. And that was just really fun. I think that's what it's all about. That's one of the things that is like one of my newly emerging whys in this space for me. So I'm hot on it.
We stuck the landing of like, we did the big run. We got lots of running done. And then we lived for 3 days with like none running.
which is very
Which I
healthy.
loved. Yeah. Cause like so often when we travel, like when we were in Portugal, we were both running for like multiple hours a day, which is tough to balance with wanting to explore other cultures. I mean, it can be, it's a yes and, because like often like running is one of my favorite ways to explore other cultures, but it's also, there are other ways. So, finding that balance is a work in progress, but I thought this race offered a lot of both.
So we used your dad and your mom as our crew for this race. Parents as crew, hot or not?
I'm going to say they don't listen, so I can be 100% honest. It's like fine, they did their job. They were where they needed to be at the right time, and they had the stuff, and they did it perfectly. And I love them. I know that my mom has seen me DNF a race before at Western States, and that was not a fun time for her because I did not look like I was having fun, and I don't think she liked seeing that, and she was like, I never want to go to another ultra again. I didn't like that. So I felt good that we got her to come back to an ultra and like get to see me having type 1 fun.
I give her a lot of credit for being willing to be a participant in something that she said she'd never do again.
Exactly. My dad freaking loves it. Like Coach Rome, he's in there, he's cheering. He loved being a part of it. He nailed it under difficult circumstances that we will discuss at length momentarily. And so they did as good a job as I could expect anyone to. So, I would say reasonably hot. My only caveat to that is, like, usually when I have you or, like, my other friends who are, like, pro and elite trail runners crew me, they just kind of provide, like, a different level of, like, they know exactly what they need to say to me. They can tell me, like, what position I'm in. They can help me I guess it's just, like, I'm mostly, like, my parents are amazing, but I'm also additionally blessed that like my literal like partner in life is a professional coach and professional athlete, and my bestie Kylie is like also an amazing athlete and like professional like registered dietitian nutritionist. So it's mostly just because I've been spoiled that I'm like literally surrounded by pro athletes and experts, and that's usually who I'm used to crewing me. Is like I roll into a crew station and I have like Kylie, I have Amelia Boone, I have John Levitt, like I literally just have like some of the best humans on earth. And I feel like that's like team Stay Wet, Slayer Slay. We still have a group. We have a very active group chat. Shout out Slayer Slay. Like those are my people forever. So both things are true.
The thing that I noticed a lot about using your dad was my crew, using him as crew was that, because he wasn't experienced, he asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And it kind of, from a coaching perspective, I thought a lot about this for some of my athletes who, are getting into ultras. and haven't, needed to use crew before. And you can't really like over explain some of these things.
No.
But at a certain
they
point,
were like, will there be water at aid
Right.
station? Which like at UTMB, you're like, yeah, of course. But then like at Leadville, like, no, you can't just like walk into it. Your crew can't just like go into it. So it's a lot of the knowledge we take for granted is not,
right.
should not be.
Like we're just like, okay, here's the bag of stuff. Here's the stuff.
Yeah.
And do the thing. And it's like, oh wait, you have to actually like explain in a step-by-step process how this works. And I think it's really important for athletes to recognize, like, if you're working with crew that's never crewed before, take the time to explain all of the small details, because if you don't, it will end up as a clusterfuck on race day. And like your parents were totally new to this, and like I'm gonna say parents' crew is totally hot because
wow, Kurt is gonna be so pumped to hear this.
I didn't have any issues. I gave Kurt like pretty explicit instructions, and then I was like, and also like don't really talk to me at all, and don't engage with me.
Which like because they share DNA with me, tough.
Like I'm gonna grab the stuff, and like I'm probably just gonna say like, oh, this is hard and I'm doing fine, and I'm just gonna leave.
Yeah.
And like you don't need to do more than that.
Yeah.
And if there's something else, I will tell you.
Yeah.
And that's a product of being experienced in a lot of ultras at this point.
Yeah.
But I thought like, sometimes with parents, they freak out, or you're not looking too good. Are they gonna die? Like, there's a lot of stuff that could maybe go on there. And I'd say like your dad just like totally nailed it.
Yeah.
And he was like where he needed to be. I didn't realize how close some of those like it was for him to get there, but like, which is totally amazing. But I say go for it. Like if your parents can handle it and they're into it and they can take direction, well, there's no reason not to use parents.
Yeah.
Use the people who love you and who you feel comfortable maybe seeing you in challenging, awkward, messy situations.
And I was also just pumped that like, I could share, like, this is like one of the bigger, like, it's a golden ticket race. It's a UTMB World Series qualifier. Like, it is a big competitive European ultra. Yeah, and like my dad had been to Leadville, which is cute. He got to see me have like a great day, but also it's, it's not like me finishing in the dead of night when there's literally like 2 people at the finish line is not the same thing as like at UTMB when there's like the streets are packed out. So I felt excited to share like a sport that I love with them in a different way with them. And that was really cool and exciting too. And I just wanted to share some practical tips for being crewed by, novices, or like this is what we do even when we have like Amelia Boone A team,
right?
Just because she's like the example of like the best crew. She and Kylie are like, gosh, they deserve a Nobel Prize for crewing. Shout out, you guys.
They are dialed in.
What TJ does that I have also started to do is like for each aid station having like a plastic bag that has the stuff that you want. So it's just like all ready to go. People don't need to fill up flasks. And then it's set like TJ will write on an index card or a piece of paper like exactly what should be in there and what like, do you take a headlamp in, put a headlamp, like take away a headlamp, put a headlamp in, rain jacket, like all the stuff so that like they pick up the bag, they can see the stuff they're supposed to hand you, and they have any instructions just like immediately at their fingertips. And I think that can be a way to make crewing easier for folks.
Even more ideal, it's like the simpler it is. It's just like everything in this bag you will give me.
Yes.
And nothing else.
Correct.
Like you give me this bag, this spot, give me those things.
I know, like this was a lesson I learned at Leadville because I was like, maybe I'll do this limeade, and like maybe I'll have, or at Run Rabbit when I was like, give me the purple jacket, and you were like, oh my god, all of your jackets are purple.
Right, like which purple jacket? There's 6 bags of clothes, and everything's purple.
I'm an overpacker, and when you have a beautiful, gorgeous, brilliant TJ as your crew, sometimes it can facilitate you not making the correct decisions that you need to make. So what I've learned from you is like, it's actually like, you don't want to like necessarily be minimalist to your detriment, but being over prepared is actually not any better, right? Like having a bunch of extraneous like emotional support jackets is not helpful. So bring the things you need, know what you need, and be able to communicate clearly with your crew.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot. All right, golden ticket races. Hot or not?
Man, I signed up for my first golden ticket race. It was supposed to be in April of 2020, so obviously that never happened. And I feel like I signed up for it. I was like, fuck yeah, like golden ticket, let's go. It was supposed to be canyons, but then COVID happened. And for a while, I felt nervous to sign up for a golden ticket race because it's very competitive. And also, I don't always love the like, especially with like where the sport is now, there's just like a lot of like around it that I don't always love. And especially like when I was working in the media, it always felt like not fun to be around that. Like it felt like being around my job a lot too.
Right.
And it felt like pressure and like eyes on me that I didn't like. And golden ticket races are kind of like the example of that. So and they're also just like really competitive, and the women's side of the sport is getting extremely competitive. So I've always had like a little bit of a like, I know this is something I want to do, but like, when will I be ready? I'm waiting for permission from someone to sign up for a golden ticket race. And that's a really flawed way of thinking about things.
Yeah, because you're putting, you know, the agency over that process in the hands of things that are outside of your control and external to you. I think golden ticket races are hot. But I think I'm sure that I will do something like canyons next year, or you know, in the future. Those are races that I'm interested in. I'm interested in being in those competitive fields. I mean, but I think in particular, like doing one abroad really was interesting. Like I thought that was more interesting to me, to get outside of American ultra running.
Right.
And I don't know.
Like, especially, like, we live in Colorado, so it's, like, a lot of times it feels like we fly out to California to race other people from Colorado.
Right. Totally. So it was nice to, like, go and not really race any other Americans, and, like, certainly...
With the exception of Jim.
Jim Walmsley, who, you know, I'm not racing against.
Technically you are.
We shared the start line, and that was about it.
We shared a cab with Killian, technically, just a few hours apart.
Yeah, right. But to race, like, other great athletes who are European and kind of get out of the mix of American ultra running, I think it was actually quite refreshing. So
I think so too. It just had a totally different vibe. The whole texture of the thing was different.
Speaking of textures, aid station. Let's talk a little bit about some aid station, hot or not, on some aid station food. Some very regional selects.
Yes.
From the...
My parents couldn't freaking believe the aid stations. My mom was like, what? You guys are just like out here walking around eating pie? Are you kidding me?
So, okay. Hot or not, aid station charcuterie.
I'm going to say not hot. Like, how does what does the human body is not meant to convert meat and cheese into miles that effectively?
It's not. You can control F search any of our previous podcast episodes on race day nutrition.
And charcuterie is not going to come up a lot.
We don't mention charcuterie. But if you're one of those athletes out there, maybe you're an Italian athlete who did the race and somehow stumbled upon this podcast, and you ate the charcuterie out there. Please, I want to hear from you. Send me an email, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. What does the charcuterie do for you? How does it help you perform at your highest level? I need to know, because I feel like okay, I'm just going to go here. UTMB doesn't supply the little pins to put on put your bib on your jacket, because they say it's a waste product and it's not environmentally friendly. But I'm wondering how much charcuterie gets put in the trash at the end of these events, because no one eats that.
Yeah.
And so is it better to just not have charcuterie, but to have pins?
My hypothesis is that we're at the front of the race, and we're not running amongst people who are sort of running at charcuterie effort.
So someone's sitting down and they're having like a 5-course meal.
Oh yeah, dog.
They're
doing like a prefix. They're doing degustation.
That rain at 3 a.m. because of those decisions.
Tough.
Very bad choices.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about I mean, I'm assuming since they have it, people are eating it.
Oh my God. All right, I want to hear from you. Okay, I'm not hot on the charcuterie.
Me neither. Really anything.
Or the cheese. Does cheese and charcuterie, that kind of goes together, right?
They had like stew. They were ladling out
Okay.
hot stew.
Aid station, what was it? It was like a jowl stew?
Boar stew.
Boar stew. Hot or not?
I can't imagine eating wild hog product while exercising.
If I'm off base here, I'm flexible. I want to hear from you.
What if the thing standing between you and a golden ticket is boar stew?
I'm sure Jim Walmsley had hot flasks of boar stew out there as he ran this race in 9 hours and 50 minutes. Absolutely. For sure.
It's amazing.
We're missing the cutting edge of performance fueling here. Okay.
I'm so proud of everyone at that race.
Yes.
Amazing job,
And
everyone.
I am particularly proud of you. I'm going to call you out right now. Drinking coffee during a race. Hot or not?
So, context. I got 2 hours of sleep before this race. We went to bed at like 6 p.m.
Yes.
So we're in bed, and TJ falls asleep at like 7 p.m. And I'm like, okay, this is fine. There's still like a ton of time before the race. So like I listened to an audiobook. An hour goes by. I'm like, okay, great. It's only 8 p.m. That's fine. Another hour goes by. Another hour goes by. And I'm like, oh my God, it's 10 p.m. The race is in. Like, I wake up in 4 hours. Now I'm starting to get a little anxious. So I put on a meditation. I do 3 meditations. Next thing I know, it's like 11 p.m. It's 11:30. I finally fell asleep like a little bit before midnight. And then the alarm went off at 2 a.m. So I did not sleep. And that is not usually like me. Like, I didn't feel nervous about the race, but I think I just hit, like, a weird mental thing. Like, slipped into, like, a weird mental rabbit hole where I just did not sleep. And that was very stressful.
It's tough to sleep. So I was looking at some... I was listening to a doctor talk about sleep recently before races. And the doctor was saying, well... there's an anticipation factor that happens that can prevent you from falling asleep, but your body actually, when it's anticipating, doesn't need as much sleep to feel as good.
Okay, so this rings true because, you know, I was kind of like, oh shit, I got 2 hours of sleep. I feel like I can't even drive a car. But then I went and ran a race and it was fine.
Right. But you did drink a liter of coffee.
I did drink a liter of coffee.
That's 2 flasks of coffee.
2 flasks of coffee.
2
Not
pounds
at the same
of coffee.
time. So
it's 1,000 milliliters of coffee.
Maybe 50K in, I started to feel a little bit sleepy. I felt pretty okay throughout most of the day. Like, physically felt good, but like a little like sleepy, like, you know, depth perception was not killing it, and it was like raining and cloudy all day, so it was sort of like the passage of time was weird. So I decided I would treat myself at an aid station by getting a flask of hot coffee.
And how did that go?
Amazing.
I can't believe that.
It was amazing.
I would never advise this.
No one should do this.
This is
a bad idea. Like,
and you said that this coffee had milk in it.
I think there was some milk in it. Because it wasn't just like black coffee. There was like some like it was kind of sweet and milky.
It's like a gateway to the charcuterie.
Yes, I guess this is how it happens.
To the pie.
It's like, you know, first thing you're drinking coffee and then you're doing meth and eating charcuterie in the aid station. But it worked, and don't do that. Don't try that at home, kids. And so it worked so good that after another made sure like, hey, that kind of feels good in my stomach, soul, and brain.
You had a second flask.
I had a second flask. So.
Wow.
And it was warm and kind of nice.
I'm speechless.
So hopefully I don't get cancer from drinking that out of a plastic flask.
It was worth it though, right?
Totally worth it. It definitely helped. It really helped me like turn things around, because I started to get a little anxious about like, oh no, I'm actually getting tired now. And then when I was able to just like have a little bit of caffeine, I was like, great. And like, I also am a coffee gal normally, so, you know, I don't usually drink a liter of coffee a day. Desperate times and all. So don't do that, but also it would not be authentic for me to not share that.
Speaking of desperate times, let's go back to the 12th century, the feudal era. Let's talk about castles.
I love castles.
Hot or not?
Very hot. I wish we had a castle. I think we should build a castle. I think we should bring back castles. This race went through like 8 castles, and that fucking rocks. I wish every race had several castles on the route. I actively resent every race that doesn't now.
Desert rats? You mean there's no castles out there?
There's none castles in desert.
Loma?
No castles in Loma.
The Loma Castle?
The Loma Castle.
It's that one Airbnb that's like $500 a night.
Yeah. So I think castles are fucking sick.
Yeah, I thought they were really cool too. Yeah, they're like, it was just really kind of interesting how they were able to contrive the course around like all of these like pretty epic castles of the region. I remember like that the first night we got into town, we went into Gaioli.
Not sure how to pronounce that.
No
Never
idea
quite
how to
learned
pronounce
that
name, but we went into that town and they had like a old timey poster on like the administrative building wall of like all the castles.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And then I kind of was thinking about that during the race. Like, oh yeah, that's that castle I saw on that poster. Oh, here's another one.
Yeah. Hella castles.
I would say I guess I would have appreciated a bit more like actual trail development around said castles. There was a few sections where it was just like
classic UT. I keep every time I sign up for a UTMB race, I'll be like, this is the one that will be the exact amount of difficult I assume it will be, and I've never been correct about that.
I think the UTMB is the only actual UTMB race that's on trails and doesn't have any like off-road section where they just put flags
where
through
they're
the
just
woods.
like, go here now.
Yeah. All right. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about the race. Let's get into some takeaways.
So, why did you sign up for this race? Because this was your idea, and I mean, full disclosure, the reason, and this is like, do as I say, not as I do. I signed up for it because you signed up for it, and I was like, well, I don't really want to crew him. I would rather just run it because I am not a good partner, and I like to run. So I was like, oh, great, like, I'll just sign up for it as well. And then I was like, well, my parents love Italy. I bet I could get them to, like, come over and crew us. So...
yeah.
That's my why for this race.
Yeah, my why for this race was that I wanted to race again in a really competitive international field. And I wanted, like I said earlier, I wanted to use, my hobby of running as a passport to go spend time in another country. I think like a lot of who I am as a person is the result of some of the extended travel I've done abroad.
Yeah.
I think, I've talked a lot on this podcast. You obviously have heard a lot about, my years living in Argentina and how they were, very transformative for me and impactful. And I really love Europe. So I guess an excuse to go over there and try to, race hard.
To carb load in Europe.
And do well and go for a golden ticket and all of that. I think it kind of like ticked all those boxes.
Yeah.
The race wasn't really what I expected, seeing the marketing materials and stuff around it, which I thought was interesting. I thought that was actually a cooler part of the experience. I was glad like that the race played harder in reality than it was on paper.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I thought it was, so I wanted to go race in Italy and you were doing it. I was like, great, let's make a whole thing about it.
Yeah, might as well. I mean, gosh, can only do this for so long. Might as well go do it in the coolest places you can.
Right, like might as well use it as like a catapult into like good, like having fun. And I think something I thought about a lot, like sort of going into this race and like now coming out of it, is like something I always say, that we always say with athletes, is like good goal should help you live the kind of life you want to live.
Exactly.
And I feel like for me, this race really checked that box because like something I did as part of my process, like since I lived in Italy, I used to be fluent in Italian and I had sort of lost connection with that. So I started taking Italian lessons again and really reconnecting with like this former version of myself that like, I wanted to live in Italy forever. Like I went to high school in Italy and really love the country and love the language and was reconnecting with the language. And every weekend, we were doing pretty high volume training. So every weekend we were running like a lot. And something I was reflecting on is like, I feel that if athletes aren't frequently absolutely forced to think thoughtfully about their priorities, then they're not going hard enough.
Yeah.
Because this race and the training we did for it, which like for me, I did the highest volume I've ever done. Like basically 2 months at 95 miles a week or more, did my first 100-mile training week. And doing that kind of volume, like, and I still, again, like, I have a full-time job. I have several jobs. You know, I'm an environmental journalist, and it is the year of our Lord 2025.
Way too much.
Like, my life is not that chill, and running is helpful for me because it forces me to prioritize, which is not a thing I do very well naturally. I want to do all things kind of well all the time, and that's not good, or like, that's how I operate. But what I actually want is to do like 3 things extremely well when it matters. And when you're training at high volume, it forces you to prioritize. It's like, well, I can't just like hop on a call with you right now.
I think it like helps you, like what I hear you saying is that it really helps you to not only set better boundaries, but understand when you need to zoom in and when you need to zoom out, and practice kind of like that art of discerning between those two different states. Like, my weekend is for training because I have to go and run for 8 to 10 hours this weekend. And so I need to be...
You don't want me emailing you after I run for 10 hours.
And nor should you be emailing anybody on the weekend, period, first of all. Second of all, you know, you need to focus on your recovery. And we have a weekend so you can do weekend things, and we have a work week so you can do work week things. But, you know, sometimes like pursuing a goal can help you understand like where you are in that place. Like, life is a process of learning how to set boundaries and being okay with that, and knowing when to be flexible and knowing when to be inflexible about things. And that is a process that's ever ongoing for myself, for anybody that I know who's high performing, because the lines are very blurry there. But like you said, like a race, a big goal can help you live the life that you want to live. And like something that we've, you know, discussed like in our partnership and our relationship is like, we want to travel more.
Yeah.
That's what we want to do with our free time and, you know, the money that we save from working and whatnot.
Dinks
like
with flexible work schedules.
I mean, somewhat flexible. We both
more flexible than when I was like on a TV show where I had to be in a studio 2 days a week.
But we both have specific deliverables that we have to deliver on every single week and every single month, and that's not. And it's tough to find time to go somewhere and like move those things around. It was not easy for you or
I had
for
to
me.
do like 9 hours of meetings one day, and that was challenging.
Yeah, and that's, you know, probably also
growth curve.
Not great. We can work on that. But like we got there.
We did.
And you know what? Like, it's about the journey to get there and what you learn in that process. And I think both of us did like big training.
Yeah.
And like that was super cool because this race, like, it actually like inherently required that big training. As we found out, like after about 20 miles in,
I was like, it's going to be that day.
So let's get into a little bit of a recap.
So let's
talk about how we started out the day, because this is not a typical way to start out a race.
So I'll preface this by saying that broadly, I support electric vehicles. Secondarily, I will say I do not support the MG car manufacturing company that I guess is from Europe.
What Zoe's trying to say is that our car broke down.
By broke down, I mean it was inoperable.
At 3:30 in the morning,
yes,
with the race starting at 4.
Correct.
We could not start the car.
Yep.
It would not go.
It would not be a car.
And we ended up having to hitchhike several miles to the start of the race. We were very lucky to get a ride.
Shout out to Annette from Serbia.
Annette, we ran. We were going to run to the start of the race.
Well, so there was kind of a moment where like maybe, so we're all like panic Googling like how to, and like I remember Googling like MG car won't start, and like the first thing I see is a Reddit thread of a bunch of people being like, these cars are pieces of shit and they die all the time. And I was like, that's not helpful. Moving on. That doesn't support my narrative. It quickly becomes apparent we are not going to have a vehicle. So TJ's like, fuck it, let's run to the main, we're sort of at like this gravel road off a main road. So we had to run to the main road, and we were like...
To hitchhike.
Well, also in my head, I was like, well, if we don't see someone, we'll just run to the start. Like, we're 5K away-ish from the start line.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Like, that's not the ideal way to start a day. I can't lay down like a 20-minute 5K right now, but at least we'll like run the race. Because I was like, it is an unacceptable outcome to me that we would just say like it didn't happen. Because like we're so close to being able to make it happen that I was like, fuck it, we'll just run to the start line.
Well, we got to that junction.
Yep.
And there seemed to be a bit of confusion around with the first couple cars that stopped.
I looked crazy.
We need to talk about your hitchhiking methods
Screaming
on
and waving your
another
arms.
time. But we jogged down the road, and Annette, she had just come from dropping her husband at the start of the race.
Yes.
And we got her
Dan from Serbia.
right before she entered her house, and we asked her, "Do you speak English? Can you give us a ride to town? Our cars doesn't work." And she drove us there, and we arrived to the start line with literally 90 seconds before the race. The guy was giving some ridiculous speech.
Oh my god, what is it with male race directors and the like, we will never surrender? Guys, we are jogging. Are you kidding me? This is not battle. This is a hobby. This is a fake sport. This is not war.
Okay.
Be cool.
I don't think it's okay to downplay that kind of stuff.
It's a real sport and we care about it, but like, we don't need the fucking war drums beating our chests before we go jog, guys.
Agreed.
That's a lot.
It was a bad vibe.
Super weird.
But I did sneak right in between Jim Walmsley and Killian.
Very cool.
Which was my goal that was my A goal for the race.
To touch the hem of their robe.
Pretty much, yeah.
How was that? Did that feel cool?
I was just like, here they are.
Cool.
Here I am. See how long I can keep up.
One of these things is not like the other.
Pretty much. I mean, when the race started, my thing was like, okay, you're just going to go as hard as you need to go to be in the mix. And I think it was because of the stress of having to hitchhike and everything. My heart rate was a lot higher than it normally would have been. And so, like, I'm pinning it downhill at the start of this race at, like, 6-minute pace. Yeah. I mean, these guys were going even faster than that because, like, the top, like, 8 guys broke away from from me and this other group. And I was just like, I was at threshold effort at 6-minute pace running downhill, which is not normal for me. Yeah. I should have been able to go up to like literally like 5-minute mile downhill pace and felt fine. Yeah. I couldn't. Yeah. And my nervous system was affected by like the stress of like panicking to get to the start and all that. Yeah. But anyways, I thought, oh, maybe this serves me later in the race to just run slower. But I didn't get to run with Jim at all. And he ended up finishing like over 3 hours, like 3 hours plus faster than me. Way to go. God, did we even run the same course?
Not totally
Was it even raining and wet and sketchy?
So that brings up another great point. Let's talk about the conditions of this race.
I hated the first 3 hours of the race.
So zooming out, I will say these are the toughest conditions I've ever run in, which was on and off raining all day. And about 45 degrees, 47 degrees?
47 was the high. Gorgeous weather.
Extremely muddy. So bad. I sometimes like, I honestly have a little bit of like fear. Like one of the things I have like a little bit of fear around in running is like getting cold and also being wet. I don't like those things very much. Yeah. And so it was sort of like the world's best exposure therapy for me to just be like cold and wet all day. And actually, I was fine. I actually started to enjoy it because I was like, oh, this was the thing I'm previously like really uncomfortable with, and this is totally fine. I'm fine. This is great. I've got my rain jacket, and like I'm grooving. As long as I keep moving, like this is fine. And the mud is horrific and terrible, but it's the same for everyone, so this is cool.
Did you think like being having a different experience in those conditions than what you would have expected to experience kind of like allowed that to be more fun?
Maybe, because I think I was just like, this is the worst that could happen. This is scary. Like, it's going to make your hydration hard. Like, I when I was a backpacking guide, like, I used to just get, like, really stressed about, like, getting wet and cold because it's, like, really hard to turn things around when you're wet and cold. And, like, I'm just a different person, and that story is no longer, I mean, again, like, there can be issues, like, I've had hypothermia and it really sucks. And I think I still carry a little bit of that fear around. And
Sure.
like just being in absolutely like abject misery conditions all day. And like I had fun. I had a great time with it. It was fine.
Yeah.
Like it was awful, but also it was great. I don't know how to explain it better than that.
I guess for me, I honestly did not. I hated the first 3 hours of that race.
Because we started at 4 a.m. so it was in the dark and like a complete downpour. So it's like you're starting the day drenched.
And the terrain was fucked up.
It was very
like
difficult.
Those downhills were really technical, and the spots that were fast were slick and muddy.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was frustrated, like I can't go any harder than I'm going right now.
Yeah,
and
I
I
felt
feel
like
I'm going to fall and hurt myself really badly. I don't understand how people are continuing to pass me and are running faster in these conditions.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like, man, are people so reckless, or like they don't care? What's their deal? Like, how are they like, I'm like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I was in opposition. I think I talked to my athletes a lot about this. Like if you're in opposition to the way things are, you're going to suffer.
Yeah.
Suffering happens when you're in opposition to the reality of your situation. And so for me, I was in like my own head in not a good way.
Yeah.
And those first 3 hours were the longest. That was the longest portion of the entire race for me.
I reached a state of radical wet acceptance. I became the wet. I was the mud. And like again, like I think
that's ideal.
Yeah. And like I mean, it's we always talk about like training in tough conditions. You and I live in Colorado. Like, I will do workouts on the treadmill when it's like super snowy and cold, but like I do most of my runs outside, and like there were a couple long runs this year that were in conditions that weren't like the most fun and easy.
Well, every single run we did in Portugal was in those exact conditions.
Yes, correct. And the race that we did in California also.
Yeah.
Wet and muddy.
Lake Sonoma.
Wet and muddy.
For me last year, it rained the entire time. So like I had plenty of experience in the past to be like, I can still perform quite well in these conditions and it's not going to make a difference. I think, in retrospect, there was, for me, a hope that I'd be further up in the field earlier.
Yeah.
So that way I wouldn't have to make up as much as I ended up having to make up in the race. Like I was in 33rd male and finished 19th male. And that's great. It's great to make up that many spots. But if I had started in 19th male, maybe I could have closed closer to the top 10. And, that's tough in these fields when you're racing. I mean, literally, this was a more competitive race than Western States.
Yeah, I mean, it's Killian and Jim.
But the depth of
of
like, if you look at the ITRA scores of
correct, and also it's a much larger field than you're going to see in any American race, too.
Right, and I mean, like when you're running against 80 other elites, and everybody's ITRA score is like in the men's is like 800 plus. There's a little pressure there.
Yeah.
That you think, well, those guys are very strong and you need to assert yourself into that part of the race. And that was my goal.
Yeah.
One of my goals was to go and get into the mix. I was frustrated a little bit that I wasn't able to do that. But the thing is, it just takes time to be able to do that. I've, in the past in pretty competitive races, I've raced from the other place, which is like insecurity and fear.
Yeah.
Guard yourself. It's much
Don't
worse
blow up.
to have to DNF because you blew up than it is to like get what you want. So don't
compete.
Yeah. Don't compete. And so like the thing that I was very proud of was that I felt like such shit in those first 3 hours.
Yeah.
But I ran as hard as I could in those first 3 hours. And just where I was where I was.
Yeah.
And that was just it. And it took me actually some time to just like be okay with that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to like, all right, this is where you are, and now you're still pursuing excellence, even though this is where you are in the field.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good point for us to do a start, stop, continue. And this is a heuristic I use with my athletes when we're debriefing from races. And I used to use as a manager, which is like, what do we need to start doing, right? Like, is there anything that you were like, oh, I need to focus on this more going forward? And then the twin of doing more things is, what are you going to let go? Because I think that oftentimes humans have the additive bias. You want to just add, I need to do more strength work. I need to eat more. I need to run more miles. We always think like more. To do that, you have to be relentless in removing things as well.
Totally.
So what are you going to take out? What's not serving you? What are you going to excise from the regimen that's not helping? Because you can't just continue to, like, the solution is never just add. You have to balance it with like, what am I going to put on my not to-do list? And that list is just as important as your to-do list. And then thirdly, continue. What are you doing well that you want to keep doing? Let's celebrate what's working. Let's recognize that. And then think about how we can continue to systemize it going into the future.
Okay, let's start with continue. Because I think, at least for me, I'm going to jump right in on this. There's a couple things that I think are really important for athletes to think about. One, specificity, race specificity. Dog.
Our dog
Bowie,
is having a
stop
nightmare
that.
under the desk and squeaking.
Okay, specificity. One of the things that I have worked really specifically on over the last 6 months is like really reprogramming my uphill running ability. And what that has looked like specifically has been really focusing on doing all of my workouts uphill.
Yeah.
Whether it's 5K, 10K work, VO2 max.
Yeah.
Those are all uphill. Whether it's threshold work at, a 4-minute or a 15-minute interval length, all uphill. Whether it's moderate work, 7 out of 10, all uphill.
Yeah.
That specificity has completely changed my uphill running. And previously I had been working on my fitness and getting better, but that specificity of practicing the uphill over and over again, it could not have come around for me in a better way than
That's
it did
awesome.
at this race, because I literally ran 17,400 feet of climbing.
Amazing.
I mean, like, I ran
yeah.
like 98% of that race.
Yeah.
I can only remember 2 instances where I hiked.
Yeah.
One was where I had a low moment, like around mile 65.
Yeah.
And the other was the last freaking climb towards the finish line, because
18 degrees mudslide.
It was a mudslide, and I kept trying to run it.
Yeah.
And I was just
kept trying to run that too.
It was like 2 steps forward, slide back, 2 steps forward, slide back.
I ended up crawling up it with my hands.
I was thinking about you because I was like, oh,
You were like, this is gonna fuck.
I was like,
Zoe's shit
Zoe's
right
gonna
on up.
definitely crawl up this.
Yeah. Thanks. Nice.
Because it was getting so wet. It wasn't
Yeah.
that because you weren't going to be fit or something. It was like, it was so bad.
Yeah.
That
the conditions
field
were very
was just a
challenging.
wet field.
Yeah.
Not a trail.
There's not a trail.
Just grass. Slick, like a slip and slide.
Yeah.
So, specificity. So important.
Find a wet field to practice crawling
Practice running on a wet field, and you will be better at running on wet fields.
Don't do that.
But there's a lot of flashy stuff out there.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a lot of like, do strides to get better at running uphill. Do this specific workout. You know what? Like, if you do the majority of your speed work uphill, doesn't matter what that speed work is, you're gonna get better at running uphill.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. It's not more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of grifty stuff out there that honestly overcomplicates something that's much simpler. Like, I did no tread hills.
Yeah.
I did no 30-minute treadhill threshold thing that stuff I did for Western States that was prescribed by my old coach. Like, I took away all of the frills
Yeah.
and just did the basic
Just
nuts
did
and
workouts
bolts,
uphill.
not sexy shit.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And it worked in a way that like 13 hours into this thing, I'm climbing and I'm running up hills. And that, like, I was like, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? Okay, number 2, continue, and
Yeah.
then I'll let you take over because I've been wanting to talk about this.
Ooh.
And this might be a continue for you, but it's do your training by time, not miles. I cannot tell the audience out there when you're 11 hours into this thing and, you know, all you're thinking is like, oh, it's just another 3-hour run.
Yeah.
Rather than
Exactly.
like, it's 15 more miles, but I don't understand how like miles work in this terrain.
Yeah.
Or I don't understand, you know, how long will it take me to do this? No, like I just knew it would be 3 more hours.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly what that would feel like and tired because
Yeah.
I had done that so many times in training that there was like, whenever that little voice came in, which was like, oh, your piriformis is a little sore. You could probably DNF if you want.
Yeah.
Oh, your hands are a little puffy. You might start throwing up. Good opportunity to DNF.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have, you know, when that little voice comes in, it's like, no.
You have reasons to not keep going.
It's right. And it's just like, no. Like, I know what is left.
Yeah.
Because I've done this. And I did training like with this specificity. What a difference that makes.
Yeah.
Because I haven't raced for myself yet with time-based training.
Yeah.
And I could not believe how much more confidence I had as a result.
I would
of
say
that.
so. I feel like it really changed, and I wish I could more eloquently describe, but I feel like it has rewired my brain to really understand how to wrap my head around these longer races.
Yeah.
And it made me feel a lot more connected to the effort, and it just made me feel a lot more secure in what I was doing, rather than like, 75 miles is like a long way, thinking about it in terms of time and like thinking about time in my training. It helped me because I can be a mileage diva and I like to have mileage. It makes me feel good about myself because therapy takes a while to take, apparently. So being focused on the thing that actually matters, which is effort, and I think time is a better proxy we know that time is a better proxy for effort than mileage, particularly on terrain like this. That was a big shift in my training as well. And I was initially like really nervous and like a bit reluctant to accept it into my heart. And I love it. It's great. It really helped. And I would say in that similar vein, my other continue is just like the style of training, which was like higher volume training in general. I felt very prepared for this race. I had an awesome training block. I feel like there's always like, as someone in eating disorder recovery, there was always like a little voice in my head that's like, you have to be careful with yourself. Like you'll never be able to, train the way you want to train. Like you haven't earned it. You made this mistake when you were young and it's always going to haunt you. And I've always just had some like anxiety around the higher volume training, and I freaking loved it. Again, like it felt great in my body. It taught me important life lessons. And I think that I felt like I was, at mile 75 of this thing running up hills, and I was like, holy fuck, this is sick.
Yeah.
And I felt, I think for me, I guess like my start, I felt like my limiting factor in this race was my challenge with running technical terrain, which was not helped by how muddy it was.
Dude, that course was very technical.
Yeah, and so I think that it was helpful. Thank you, Chianti, for making it so abundantly clear that I need to get better at running technical terrain. So that's going to be a big focus of mine going into the rest of this season, and I feel super grateful to have learned that lesson pretty early on and on, foreign soil before I get to come back to Colorado and really drill that when the mountains open up. Yeah, so my continue is just like the style of training is working. It is not fancy. It is a lot of hard work. There aren't like a ton of Baroque workouts. Like most of my workouts were like very, very simple.
How many times did you repeat a workout?
Many, many times.
Something that I think a lot of athletes struggle with is like the novelty, needing to have a novel workout all the time to be interested in the training.
Or like I'll have people like, you already gave me, like I did 8 by 2 minutes already this year. I'm like, yeah, you did. We're going to do it a lot more.
I want to kind of repeat something that the great coach Jack Daniels says in his book, which is don't move on to a harder workout until you find the workout you're currently on is now easy for you. So it's like this process of micro mastery, of like truly mastering the workout that you're in before thinking that you need to. We're already always on to the next great shiny thing before we've even integrated what we've done.
Yeah.
And I think the less sexy your training is, probably the more effective it is.
Yeah. Yes.
Because you have more opportunities to become a master at what you're doing, and that's the whole point.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, something that we talked about going into this race is, like, you and I switched coaches. You switched coaches last summer. I did in November. And I was like, if I have a good day, I'm going to say it's because of the training. And if I have a bad day, I'm going to say it's because I need to give the training more time. Yeah. I think so often we have athletes, like, sign up for coaching and, like, they'll jump into an ultra, like, 12 weeks in. And when it's not, like, a huge breakout, they're like, well, is it even working? And these things take time. Like, that's just the truth of it. And
totally.
I was glad that we had an honest conversation about, like, it'll be, I was really curious to see what I could do with what I thought was the best fitness I've ever had. But also you're handed the day you're handed. And for me, I felt like my result was limited not by my fitness, but by my technical running ability, and particularly, just running technical, like, Appalachian Trail technicality down hills that are also just covered in mud. Just slippery as fuck.
It's not every day that you'll have to hitchhike to the start of the race and not know if you'll have crew.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. We started the race. I texted my dad, and I was like, please try to get to the aid stations. And then I turned my phone on airplane mode, and I was like, we're in God's hands now.
I don't know how he did it. He hitchhiked to every single aid station.
He did. My mom hiked 2 miles to an aid station from our Airbnb. That's savage. Shout out to the Roans. Epic. We are an insane people.
Your dad made it to the first spot for me by 3 minutes, he said.
Oh my God. He literally, when he realized he was not going to have a vehicle for the day, he hitchhiked into town, bought a notebook so that he could write the name of the aid stations, like, in Italian to hitchhike with it. So
it worked.
It worked.
It worked. I give him a lot of credit because it would have been it was already a longer day than both of us were anticipating.
Yeah, by couple hours.
But it would have been an even longer day
if we had to be eating knack.
Had to eat knack or aid station charcuterie.
Gosh, there's part of me that was like, I'm ready. Like, if my dad's not there, let's go pretzel time, baby. Soup mode. I'm switching into soup mode.
No, I will never switch into soup mode. I will use sports nutrition.
I like soup
until I start throwing up.
Soup and coffee, baby.
All right. What are you going to let go of?
What am I going to stop? I think, like, the thing I'm stopping is, like, I think it's doing the things, like I said earlier, like, if I don't have to level up in my life, if I don't have to get really serious about work-life boundaries, if I don't have to hold the line for that space in my life, then I'm probably not training hard enough. Like, that is what balance is for me. And, like, that's not how it's going to be, like, 365 days of the year, you know? Like, my life looks pretty different today. I'm wearing loose pants and a grandpa sweater, and that is my day today. And also, I mean, yeah, so it's a lot about balance, but I think for me, and this was something that was easier for me when it was, like, work stuff, like when I was writing my book or when I was, like, doing my TV show, I found it very easy to say no to things because I really believed in those things, and sometimes it's easier for me to say no to some types of work when it's another type of work, and I struggle to own my athletic identity, and I feel like if someone's like, oh, I want to talk to you, but it's, like, during my running time, there's always a part of my brain that's like, yes, sacrifice your run to this person who does not care about you at all, and doing this level of training, which I would not have previously been able to do when I was, like, at my old job. But, like, also I feel like I'm writing better than I ever have, training better than I ever have. And it's just because those boundaries have become firmer. And obviously I still have work to do in terms of firming them up even more.
You do. I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable for a second here.
No.
So when you say it's not about that person respecting your boundaries. Really what you're saying is I don't respect my own boundaries.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so,
that's
like,
what it is. Like, just to
that's
be,
what you want to stop.
because I feel like an asshole being like, I want to, I came in 13th at Chianti and I feel like my jogging hobby is more important than your email. Like, that is hard for me to own that narrative.
Totally, because, well, there's a lot in there. We don't need to go too deep into it. I'll save you. We can talk about it after. But and we both work on this, obviously. And I think it's important to note a lot of coaches work on this because we're in a service providing industry.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to advocate for yourself. And sometimes also it's easier to advocate for yourself if you have a result that you think merits having those boundaries.
Yeah, and that's flawed, and I know that.
Right.
But, like, it's hard because, like, my whole life I've been told I'm not a good athlete. Like, you used to be a pro athlete. Like, you were a pro skier. You have had brands invest very seriously in financial ways in your athleticism. Like, I don't. Like, I'm just a lady that runs. Like, I do have some brand support now, but, like, it's not my job. And I take my journalism job very, very seriously. And I take my coaching very, very seriously. And I take the podcast production very, very seriously. But there is always this narrative humming in the back of my mind that when I have running, it's this, like, thing that I still feel very tender about because I feel really vulnerable about it. Because, like, I was cut from my high school cross country team. I've always been overlooked in the ultra running space. So there's always some part of me that, like, when an athlete or, like, someone else at work wants to eat into my running time, I will just gladly cede it to them because that feels safe. That feels comfortable. That fits right into the narrative of, like, you're not a real athlete. So, like, why would you protect your real running time? That's not real.
Yeah.
They can just have it. And it is really hard for me to believe in myself as a person. And like, I know that's not what they're actually asking, right? That's my story about it. And so really dismantling that story, or actually, like, I had I'll just be honest, when I was outside, I had a boss that was like, you should not think of yourself as an athlete. And that really hurt. And I'm still struggling with that when someone who was in a position of power told me they didn't think I was a good athlete or good enough to think of myself as an athlete. And did they say that so that I would probably just give more of my time and energy to them? Maybe. Remains to be seen. But, like, I'm still working through a lot of this stuff actively, and hopefully talking about it helps other people, like, understand where I'm coming from and sort it out in their own lives.
I think people will resonate with that story. I mean, we all have our version of that. Nobody goes through life without something like that in their own parallel way. And I think, what I hear in that is the big thing to stop is to stop, giving up agency around your time and what you decide to do with your time to other people, and to continue to, it's a stop and continue. I love a stop and continue moment here, because you can continue to reclaim it.
Yeah. And to
for
continue
yourself.
Training at the level I want to continue training at, I have to stop doing some things.
Yeah.
Like, I have to do less in my life. Like, that has been my goal for the past year, is to do less. And that is really hard for me because I want to be all things to all people and to be liked and to be the go-to girl. And unfortunately, those things are at odds with my actual goal of, like, doing the things I care about well. Be a good athlete, be a good environmental journalist, put out a kick-ass podcast that changes how people think about diet and their bodies, and coach my athletes well.
Those are the behaviors you adopt to cover up the insecurity you have around really wanting to express who you are, and for that being enough and okay. I love it that's the whole reason why we do this stuff, right? Like, so we can find out more about ourselves and what makes us tick, so we can then ultimately express ourselves more freely in the world without the baggage that holds us back. Like, I talked a lot about, and have talked about on this podcast before, like, how I've raced from fear.
Yeah.
And, for me, my stop is that. Like, I have so much more fun racing from that other place.
Yeah.
And it is really hard. And I find the older I get,
fear is so easy and comfortable. People think it's uncomfortable, but I actually think it's, like, one of the easiest things for humans to feel. Like, it's just the easiest corner to retreat into.
But I think people also don't want to acknowledge the depth of their fears.
Sure.
I'm scared of this, that's, and people want to stay on that surface rather than to go like, well, I'm scared of this, but if that happens, then this is going to happen. And then that happens and this is going to happen. And then, because that's really how fear works.
Right.
Fear is like a domino effect that goes all the way down to the thing that you want, like, oh, I'm going to be discovered as a fraud, or I'll lose my house, I'll lose my business, I'll be on the street, like I'll do all this stuff and I won't be good enough. People don't want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And when they don't acknowledge that, they'll do everything.
Ends up driving the car.
They'll do
without them
everything to
knowing
cover it
Yeah.
up. And, for me, I'm learning a lot about the role that plays in my life. And that's actually a really fun process for me. I love going inside and doing that work. This race.
Shout out to Men in Therapy.
Yeah, right. And yeah, therapy and having great mentors and people who have like helped me and been a part of this journey. I give them so much credit because this isn't stuff that I just do on my own meditating. That's just not possible. Like you need people to guide you, and you need to be willing to be vulnerable and have those discussions. What I want to continue to stop racing from fear.
Love that.
As a professional skier and ski mountaineer, fear drove a lot of my process in a way that probably limited what I could do. Maybe I'm alive today because of that.
Well, love that.
Love that as well, but maybe I didn't accomplish all of that I could. And I think that, looking at that in a much safer environment, you're not really probably going to die ultra running. Can I let some of that go? And can I let some of the other? So this process for me, the continue part of this is this continual process of just letting go.
Yeah.
And one thing I discovered during the race was that I can feel quite shitty for a very long time and not really have any judgment around that, and just be there and be fine with that in a high performance setting. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And new for me, because again, it was this act similar to you, but in my way, it was this act of like, I don't need the race to have the keys. The day doesn't need to be beautiful. I don't need to be feeling flow to race hard and run all these hills. I can actually be feeling quite shitty and still make the choice to run the hill.
Clicky to work.
So it was a tremendous reclaiming of agency
Yeah.
that I experienced. And I finished 2 hours slower than I wanted to do the race at. Granted, there was like 4 more miles on the course than was like on my race plan that thanks UTMB for that. And like 800 more feet of climbing or something.
Those last 2 sneaky miles were really challenging for me.
I that was all there, but I think I learned so much and that made it worth it. Okay. What do you want to start doing?
I want to start competing more.
Nice.
That was I really liked. I ran some of my best, most competitive miles in there.
You were competing with some top professional women.
Yeah, the whole day I was chasing down Amanda Basham. I was like, I know I'm going to turn the corner. I'm going to see that red ponytail, and it's going to be game time. But didn't quite get there. So I felt like I was really able to compete, and I was chasing women down and trying to pick women off right up till the very end. I really raced. There was no point of that day where I was like, I just want to finish. I feel like, even at Leadville, there's always a point where I'm like, I'm just surviving, it's fine. Whereas every second of that day, I was like, advance, 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 advance. That was my mode all day. Every step.
So we talk a lot about this make the choice moment that occurs in races where you are met with the fatigue, the adversity, the challenge, and then you then have to say, I'm going to stay in this discomfort in order to pursue excellence at the highest level that I'm capable at in this moment, to finish this race as fast as I can. I'm not going to choose comfort. I'm not going to go slower or jog this or walk. I'm going to stay in that pain or discomfort. That moment started for me at about mile 23 of this race. And I constantly revisited it every 10 miles. Was it similar for you? Did you have any of those moments?
I was sort of, for a while, I was yo-yoing with a couple gals, and particularly my friend Genevieve, who's a pro for on here in the U.S., And I kept kind of like, I knew she was not far behind me because I kept seeing her husband at all the aid stations. And I know she's a strong runner. And I was like looking over my shoulder like a lot to see her. And at a certain point, I was just like, stop doing that. Like, run faster. If you don't want her to catch you, stop looking over your shoulder and just fucking run faster.
Run harder.
Just run harder. And I was able to transmute the anxiety I had about like these two women. So I had passed two women and then I got turned around on the course and actually started running on the course backwards.
Ugh,
which
I got lost.
That was really not optimal. Thankfully, I ran into Genevieve and she helped me get going in the right direction and helped me get my head screwed back on straight. We, all that about queens helping straighten another's crowns and whatnot. Shout out Genevieve. Shout out John. You guys are awesome. And that kind of bamboozled me for a sec. So I had to repass two people that I had like gapped significantly because I was an asshole and ran the wrong direction on the course for a significant amount of time, which is tough. Bonus miles. And so, but like I was just able to transmute that anxiety I had about like, oh, I had to work so hard to repass these women that I was just like, take all of that frustration and anxiety and just simply run harder and better. Not stupid. Like, don't be stupid, but like take all of that, like, what if they catch me? And just don't have that dialogue. Take that energy and just fucking run harder, run faster. It's not that hard.
So you want to start letting go more of what you want to start really leaning into, more of your race experience rather than what's happening around you and letting that dictate what you do.
Yeah. Well, I feel like at Leadville and at this race, I tapped into a more competitive side of Zoe where I'm really starting to figure this sport out and I'm starting to be able to like train and fuel to the extent where like even at longer races, I'm not in survival mode. I'm competing through the finish line, which is always my goal. Like, yes, I do want to finish, but I want to be engage. I want to be fighting for inches, like Al Pacino says, the whole day. That is my goal. I never want to be in a space mentally where I start to let things slip. I want to always be thinking about advancing if I have a good day. And that's the day I had. But like going forward, the thing I want to start doing is like to do that, I need to put myself into competitive races frequently.
Yeah.
So I want to start signing up for more golden ticket races, more UTMB races. I don't need it to like, I don't want to get caught up on the carousel of like needing to like go to every golden ticket race to endlessly chase it. I want to do it when it works for my life and feels meaningful, feels good for my brain, body, work-life balance, and to just continue to expose myself to a higher level of competition because that felt good to me. And I need that level of competition to feel the way that I like to feel.
I think that's excellent. Great. I'm excited.
Yeah. What about you? What's your start?
It's hard to articulate this. I'm going to do my best for the audience, but I want to start leaning into a deeper, more intrinsic trust in my endurance, in my abilities. I think like part of this process of letting go that occurs, and I think it's the longer the race is, the more you end up having to just let go. Yeah. Because then you're just like, I gotta just finish. I'm gonna finish the best I can, and this is so fucking hard.
Right.
Can't believe I'm out here for this long, and my God, I don't want it to like to have to get to that point to let go. I think that there's a deeper trust that you can have that allows you to start from a place where you've let go already. And then and having done that, you can open yourself up to a deeper experience where you can really experience your potential, the work that you've done, and you can just let yourself do what you know how to do.
Yeah.
And I think I'm starting to glimpse this because of, the higher volume of training that we did.
Yeah.
And the time-based training, that it's just like so evidence-based. Like, I have done this and I know what that is.
Yeah.
And so therefore I don't have to assign anything else to it.
Yeah.
I can't articulate it any more than that because I don't exactly know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty much doing everything else there is possible to do this at a high level.
Right.
I think I'm kind of playing at the margins here, maybe of mental performance for myself.
Right.
But that's what I want.
Right. To play at those margins.
Yeah. And I want to like trust at such a deep level that I'm capable of running the way I ran at mile 23, capable of running that same effort at 75.
Yeah.
And like, I know that that's there. I degraded a little bit in this race.
Yeah.
But I do know that if you can trust at 23 that you can run that same pace at 75,
yeah,
you're going to be running a much faster race than you thought you could run.
Yeah, I think that's I'm on that learning curve too, because, you know, the first like couple ultras that like before I even had a coach, like the wheels would fall off and it would be fucking terrible.
Yeah,
and
awful.
your body learns that lesson really fast and really well.
Your nervous system learns it.
Your nervous system learns it,
Yeah.
and you have to keep being like, you're not going to explode, like, or be like, maybe we will explode, and like that's fine. We have to find that edge, but it's not okay to sit in that like, I want to run the whole race out of fear that the wheels will come off. And it's tough because like we're always moving that like, you know, the fitness threshold. We're always working so hard to move that up and up and up. So you're like, okay, like how fit am I? How much? It's like you're sort of like, you have a bank account, you don't know how much money's in it, and you're told to like go crazy in like Nordstrom. That's what it would feel like for me.
Yeah.
Is like Nordstrom rack, go crazy, but you don't know how much is in your
requ-
account. And you're like, I want to get the fucking cutest dress I can, but I don't know how much is in my account.
That requires a profound level of trust.
Yeah, you're just like swiping and hope.
I haven't embodied that yet.
Yeah.
I want to embody that. Maybe I never will because the goalposts always move as you get fitter. But I want to stay on the edge of that because I think that's where my best performances are going to be. And
like,
when I look back at previous races where I raced like really free without a lot of mental restraint, there was just like, maybe there wasn't even trust. There was just doing the thing and not even, there was nothing.
Yeah.
It was just do the thing.
Right.
So maybe it even goes beyond trust. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you're never getting hit with that overdraft fee, you're just not going hard enough. But it's scary. Like,
even Jim
scary.
Walmsley gets hit by the overdraft fee.
Yeah.
We've seen him fail a lot.
Yes. Right. And yeah, I think that's like always the uncomfortable conversation to have with athletes. They're like, how hard should I go? And oftentimes I'm like, as hard as you can.
Yeah.
And like, depending on the athlete's goal, like a lot of times people very valid just want to finish, and that's great. But oftentimes when athletes are exploring their potential at those margins, it's like, here's the tough conversation: is there's nothing I can tell you that will help you absolutely nail the effort we're going to go for. You will know if you finish and it was easy, you didn't go hard enough. You will know if you blow up and DNF that you went too hard. Those are our bumpers. Good luck. Have fun out there.
Yeah. And you can always sprint down the finishing line, shoot.
Yes.
And throw up everywhere. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Hope you got some good takeaways out of that. If you got a question for a future call, topic you want us to talk about, if you want to tell us about your experience eating
Aid Station Charcuterie
and wild boar stew, we'd love to hear from you.
Ciao.